My father kicked me out at 18 with nothing. I worked 70 hours a week eating noodles while sleeping in my car. 12 years later, he lost everything and showed up begging at my door. But I slammed it in his face, and what happened next broke them. I'm 30 years old. I work in tech. I make good money. I have my own house. And about 6 months ago, my parents showed up at my door, asking if they could move in with me because they lost everything. I closed the door in their faces. I know it sounds horrible when I say it like that, but I need to tell the whole story because half my family thinks I'm a monster, and the other half understands why I did what I did. And honestly, I just need to get this off my chest. I guess I should start at the beginning, or like, when I was 18 and my parents, Stephen and Dorothy, told me I had exactly 1 month to find a job, get a place to live, and basically disappear from their lives. It wasn't a conversation. It was more like an announcement. I came home from school one day. It was like March or April. I don't remember exactly, and they were both sitting in the living room waiting for me. My father said, "You're 18 now. You're an adult. You have 1 month to leave." And my mother just nodded there, beside him cleaning the coffee table that was already clean because she was always cleaning something, like obsessively. It wasn't a total surprise, to be honest. My father worked in construction and had always been the type of person who saw everything in terms of numbers, how much does this cost? How much does that cost? He made me feel like I was an investment that wasn't giving returns. And my mother, Dorothy, was technically a stay-at-home mom, but I really don't know what she did all day, besides clean and reorganize things that were already perfectly organized. She was never maternal, let's say. When I was a kid and got hurt or something, she was more like, "Don't bleed on the floor," than like, "Oh, my baby, are you okay?" She took care of me in the technical sense that she gave me food and clothes, but emotionally it was like living with a robot that had OCD about cleaning. The thing is, I had nothing prepared. Zero savings, because any money I made from odd jobs went to my stuff because my parents stopped buying me clothes, and things like that, when I was around 16. I had 1 month of classes before graduating high school. And I was basically in total panic but trying not to show it because, in my house, showing emotions was like admitting weakness. You know what I mean? I spent that month sleeping like 3 hours a night looking for any job that would take me. I got one at a grocery store. The closing shift that paid like $8 an hour. Which, yeah, was better than nothing, but it also wasn't enough to live on. I found a studio. And when I say studio, I mean basically a room with a bathroom that didn't even have windows, in the ugliest part of town. It cost $450 a month plus utilities. I did the math like 1,000 times, and technically I could afford it if I didn't eat much and didn't spend on absolutely anything else. The day I left, my father helped me put my stuff in his truck, a blue Ford F-150 that he cared for more than me. That's for, sure. He didn't say anything the whole way. My mother stayed home cleaning my room before I even finished packing. She was literally vacuuming while I was taking out the last box. When we got to the studio, my father said, "This is part of being an adult, Dakota. You better make it work." And he left. No hug. No, "We're going to miss you." Not even a good luck. The first few months were, I don't even know how to describe it, basically hell. I worked from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the grocery store, got home around midnight, slept until 7 a.m., and then spent the whole day looking for another job or trying to figure out how I was going to go to college because supposedly that was the plan. Right? Graduate, go to college, have a career. But my parents had made it very clear they weren't going to help me with any of that. I ate basically instant noodles and whatever I could get with a discount at the grocery store. I lost like 15 kilos in 2 months. My clothes were too big on me. There were nights I went to bed with my stomach so empty I couldn't sleep, but at the same time I was so tired I couldn't stay awake either. I got a second job, washing dishes at a restaurant on weekends. The owner was a Filipino guy who paid me in cash and let me take home the food they were going to throw out. That saved me. Honestly, I worked 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I had no social life, no time for anything. My high school classmates were at college making friends and going to parties, and I was scrubbing dishes with hands so cracked they bled. About 6 months in, when I had saved up a little bit, I enrolled at community college to take 2 classes: business administration and some basic computer stuff, I think. I went to classes at 9 a.m., took a nap in my car in the parking lot, and then went straight to the grocery store. The professors probably thought I was the most disinterested student in the world because I fell asleep in class constantly, but it was that or not go at all. My parents didn't call me once that first year. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, nothing. It was like I had never existed. My Aunt Angela, who's my mother's sister, called me like twice to see how I was, but I could hear in her voice that she was doing it more out of obligation than real interest. I told her I was fine even though I clearly wasn't, because what was I going to gain from complaining, right? Let's fast forward a bit. At 21, I finished my associate's degree. It took me 3 years instead of 2 because I could only take 2 or 3 classes per semester, but I did it. I transferred to State University, which was like 40 minutes from where I lived. By then, I had gotten a better job at a call center that paid $12 an hour, and I kept the dishes gig on weekends. I moved to a slightly better apartment, one that at least had a window, and where you didn't hear gunshots at night. College was hard in a different way. All my classmates had new laptops, lived in dorms or in nice apartments their parents paid for, and complained about things like the cafeteria not having good vegetarian options. I went with a used laptop I bought for $200 on eBay that shut off every time the battery went below 30%, and I had lunch with granola bars I bought at the dollar store. I didn't fit in, basically. But I didn't really care that much because I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to get a degree. I focused on computer science because I realized in those community college classes that I was good at it and that there were jobs that paid real money. I studied like crazy. Any free minute I had, I used to learn more, do projects, build things. I don't know. I think I channeled all that anger and resentment I felt toward my parents into being good at something, into proving that I was worth something, even though they clearly thought I wasn't. At 24, I graduated. My Aunt Angela went to the ceremony. My parents didn't. They didn't even send me a congratulations message. Honestly, I don't even know if they knew I had graduated. I kind of assumed my aunt had told them. But who knows? At that point, I had stopped expecting anything from them. 2 months after graduating, I got my first real job at a tech company. It wasn't Google or anything like that, but they paid $55,000 a year, which for me was like winning the lottery. I remember when I saw the offer in the email, I started crying, sitting there in my shitty apartment. It was the first time in years that I felt like maybe things were going to be okay. With that job, I could finally live like a normal person. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand. I ate real food. I could pay all my bills and still have money left over to save. It was such a weird feeling, like not having to count every penny. For years after I kept buying the cheapest things at the grocery store out of habit, until one day my coworker said to me, "Bro, you make good money? You can buy the good brand of cereal?" And I realized I was still living mentally, like I was poor, even though I wasn't anymore. At 26, I bought my house. A 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. When I signed the papers, I had to sit in the car for like 20 minutes because I couldn't process that I had done it. That I had gone from sleeping in that studio with no windows, eating instant noodles, to having my own house. All on my own. Without help from anyone. And then, like 2 years later, when I was 28, my Aunt Angela called me on a Sunday afternoon. She said, "Dakota, I need to tell you something about your parents." And I was like, "What happened? Did they die or something?" Because honestly, I couldn't think of another reason why she'd be calling me about them. But no. She told me that my father had put all his savings into some kind of business with a friend, something about buying properties to remodel and resell, and that everything had gone to shit. They lost the house, their savings, everything. They were living in a motel. My first reaction was like, okay, and what does that have to do with me? It sounds horrible, but it was the truth. My aunt was quiet for a moment and then said, "Well, I thought you should know. They're your parents." And I told her, "No, they're not. Not for the past 10 years. And I hung up. A week later, I was at my house on a Saturday morning having coffee, and someone knocked on the door. I opened it, and there they were, Stephen and Dorothy. They looked old, honestly. My father was like 56 years old at that point, but he looked 70. My mother was thinner and had gray hair, no longer blonde, like I remembered it. They said, "Hi, Dakota. Can we talk to you for a moment?" I let them in because what else was I going to do? They were literally at my door. They sat down in my living room, on my couch that I bought with my money, looking at my house that I bought with my work, and my father said, "We need your help." He explained everything about the failed business, the debts, that they had lost everything. And then, and this made me so angry I almost started shaking. He said, "We thought we could stay here with you temporarily until we get back on our feet." I stared at them for like 30 seconds without saying anything. My mother added, "It would only be for a few months. We don't want to be a burden." And something in my brain just exploded. I told them, "You threw me out on the street when I was 18 years old without a penny, without help, without anything. You told me to figure it out on my own. So now I'm telling you the same thing. Figure it out yourselves." My father started with how that was different, that I was young and could work, that they were already old, and that I had a moral obligation to help my family. And I laughed. I literally laughed in his face. I said, "Moral obligation, seriously? Where was your moral obligation when you kicked me out? Where was it when I graduated high school, college, when I bought this house? You didn't know about any of that because you never cared." My mother started crying, saying they were sorry, that they had made mistakes, that I didn't understand how hard it was to raise a child. And I told her, "You're right. I don't understand, because you never really raised me. You just kept me alive until you could get rid of me." I told them to leave. My father tried to keep talking, but I interrupted him and said, "No, out of my house now." My mother asked, "So, what are we supposed to do?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't care." And I closed the door on them. I sat on the floor of the entryway after they left, and I felt nothing. I thought I was going to feel guilt or sadness or something, but I just felt empty and also like a weird relief. Like, I had finally told them everything I needed to tell them for years. But it didn't end there, obviously. The calls started. Text. Messages. My father, my mother, my Aunt Angela, my cousin Joshua, who I barely knew, all telling me I was being cruel, that family helps each other, that I was successful, and they had nothing. My aunt said things like, "I know they hurt you, but now they need help. Be the bigger person." My cousin straight up told me I was an ungrateful piece of shit son. I blocked everyone. I didn't care. I had spent 10 years building myself a life from scratch, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their drama. About a month later, I received an envelope from a lawyer. I thought, they can't be that stupid. But yes, they were. It was a letter saying that according to filial responsibility laws in our state, I had a legal obligation to support my parents if they couldn't support themselves. They were threatening to sue me. I hired my own lawyer, who laughed when I showed him the letter. He told me that yes, those laws existed, but they were almost never enforced, and that in my specific case, they had no chance because they voluntarily kicked me out and cut off contact. My lawyer sent a response letter that basically said, "Try it and we're going to destroy you in court," and my parents' lawyer backed down immediately. After that, they went quiet. I didn't hear anything for like 6 months. And then, about 3 months ago, a package arrived at my house. It was a small box with a photo of me from when I was like 5 years old on Halloween, dressed as I don't know what, and a handwritten letter from my mother. It said something like, "We know we can't undo the past. We just wanted you to know that we're sorry and that you were always our son no matter what happened." It was signed by both of them. I didn't answer. I put the letter in a drawer and it's still there. I don't know what they expected me to do with that. Forgive them? Send them money? I don't know, and honestly, I don't care to know. My Aunt Angela called me last week from a number I didn't have blocked. She told me that my parents are living in a subsidized apartment and that my father got a job at Home Depot or something like that they're basically surviving. She asked me if I was ever going to talk to them again. I told her I didn't know. That probably not. And to please stop calling me about them. I keep going with my life. I work. I hang out with friends. I'm seeing someone who's amazing and who doesn't understand how parents can do that. There are days I feel bad about the situation. I'm not going to lie. I wonder if I'm a bad person, if I should be more compassionate, if in 20 years I'm going to regret this. But then I remember those hungry nights in that horrible studio. I remember working 70 hours a week while trying to study. I remember all the important moments of my life where they weren't there. And the guilt goes away. I built all of this myself. This life, this house, this stability, everything. And I don't owe it to anyone but myself. It sounds selfish when I say it like that, but it's the truth. They made their decision 12 years ago when they told me to leave. I'm making mine now. I don't know how all of this is going to end. Maybe in a few years I'll feel different. Maybe not. For now, I'm at peace with my decision. Or at least that's what I tell myself. Some days I believe it more than others.